Today, we're back into Travel 101, as we have been for a while now. We are nearing the end, and we're going to talk about public transit. Start with trams, because those are the street trains, or streetcars, they're called sometimes. Whether or not those are accessible and whether or not they exist, I know they're pretty popular in Melbourne. In Germany, they have them. Switzerland, they have them. I'm trying to think of other places that have trams. Those are the ones that I've been to, maybe a few others that I forget. Most of the time they are accessible. There's a platform that you get onto, and then maybe there's a little bit of a bump from the platform to get onto the train. Usually it's pretty level because the platform raises up itself. So the platform goes up above street level and you kind of go up onto it, and then the train comes and you get on and off. Sometimes there will be a bump, so be prepared for that because it depends on the station that you're getting off at. Streetcars, in my experience, don't have as much information about them. For example, in London, you can get the TfL app and it tells you all of the updates about every single station, if there's accessibility, what type of accessibility, and if the train is down, if it's delayed, or if the station isn't available because of some issue, so the train doesn't go to that station anymore temporarily. For trams, I've never seen anything about that tells you so many details about it. But you can most of the time assume that they're going to be accessible. And if it's not accessible, if you can't really get on, you can assume that you won't really be able to get off. The only thing to be weary about is a kind of half train, half tram. In Germany, they have the trains that are, sometimes the station is above ground, sometimes it's below ground. And it's really hard to figure out whether or not it's accessible. I was not really able to find out how accessible some of the stations were. And sometimes it's just way too inconvenient to figure it out, and then you have to go way far away to some station that's not so good. So when it's a mix of kind of tram where it's above ground or train, the tram can sometimes be a station way up above, kind of on a bridge situation. It's hard to explain, but the station, actually the platform that you get off, is 2 or 3 levels up, not down, and it's not flat. So if you encounter that, it's better to encounter that to go down the stairs. Going downstairs is always easier than going up. So with the trams, streetcars, whatever you call them, there could be a case where the platform is actually way above. However, it's called a streetcar for a reason, because it's usually in the street. So I wouldn't be too worried about the accessibility there, and most of the time you're good there. Okay, that was an easy one. Buses are also kind of easy. It depends on the bus and depends on where you're going. If you're going somewhere in the mountains, like when I was in Taiwan, the buses are smaller because they need a smaller vehicle to go through up in the winding roads. Those are hard to find accessible buses for. Usually, what it would look like is that in the back doors, the doors open up and you have this big ramp that folds out, comes down, and then lifts you up, and then ramp comes back up, and then you're in the bus. But I could not find this information on Google Maps when you filter for accessibility or anything like that. It was really hard to find whether or not it was accessible. And sometimes it said it was, but then it wasn't. And sometimes it's every other bus that's accessible. It's kind of a mess, and in those situations, you really just need to know. So the types of buses, there's the short bus, the smaller bus that we just talked about. There's the normal bus where it's just, you get on, everybody sits on the lower level. And then maybe there's an upper level or not, like the London buses, or other buses don't have an upper level, but it's just lower level seating. And then the third type of bus is the upper level seating only, where it's more for long distance. We're talking about Flixbus or other types of that nature, where the luggage goes underneath and then everybody walks up a little set of stairs, and then they all sit up above, and that's the only place to sit. For those buses, sometimes they are just completely inaccessible. There's no accessibility at all. There's no way for you to get in. There's nowhere for you to sit if you do get in. There's nowhere for the wheelchair to go, and they just won't take you. However, sometimes if you're talking to the right people, like I was one time, they put the wheelchair underneath in the luggage area, and then my brother carried me up on his back, and then we sit down in the seats and we're good. Can't go to the bathroom in that bus. Even though there is a bathroom, I can't get there. So if you have to poop or something, you can't. Say goodbye to your pants, and that would be messy. So that's dangerous to do if you have incontinence issues. So the big buses, the upper deck buses, are definitely something that you can't do, or that you should avoid if you can avoid them. Some of the times you can do them. There are buses where they have a lift that will bring you up to the upper level, and they have a little open seating area where the seats aren't there, where you can stay in your wheelchair, and they'll lock you down with the hooks and stuff. However, for most of those, for example, for the FlixBus, you have to request the accessible accommodation a couple weeks ahead, I think, if not days. So that can be difficult, especially if you are more spontaneous with your planning and buying of the tickets. Then it really can't work. And sometimes you can buy the ticket right away. One time I've done that when I was in Detroit. There was a bus going to Ann Arbor for University of Michigan, and I bought the ticket 10 minutes before. Luckily, I was the only one that needed the accessibility because there's only one accessible ticket. I just had to make sure to buy it first because every bus was accessible that came through to that station. But I wouldn't rely on that. You definitely want to look at these things ahead of time. I just got lucky in that case. Now the normal buses. So these are the ones that you're going to encounter most of the time. For example, in Taiwan, the bus numbers are like 111. That's 3 numbers. If it's 1112, that's 4 numbers. 4 numbers means it's the upper level. 3 numbers means it's the lower level buses. Those are super easy. The buses usually have the hydraulic suspension so it can shift down, and then you know, it kind of leans into the street and you can get on. If there is no ramp, there is almost always a ramp, so you can wave. You always wave to let the bus driver know that you're getting onto that bus. Then when they stop, this is the scary part. They will sometimes let everybody on first. Then all the doors have to close, and then the ramp can beep, 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 slide out. That's how it is with the London buses. And it can be scary because the door's shut and you think, is this guy going away? And sometimes they even move the bus to get to an accessible spot, because where the ramp is, it's sometimes in the front door to get on the bus where the driver is. It's sometimes on the side door, in the middle half of the bus, where you just get on. It depends on the bus, and usually you can find out. There's either a little symbol, or you can just see the bus driver come out and open the ramp up, or if it's automatic, you see the ramp slide out. So it's pretty obvious to see which way to get on. But the scary part is that in order for that ramp to come out, they have to make sure there's no trees, there's enough space, maybe that they get to a part of the street where it like shifts down. And oh boy, just recently when I was in London, I pressed the button to get off, and the driver was in a bad spot, and they kept scooting up, stopping, and everybody on the bus, some other people were trying to get off. They were like, what are we doing? Like, is the bus stopping? Is it going? What's going on? I kind of knew that the bus driver was getting to a good spot for me for the ramp to come out, but also it didn't feel like it. It felt like he was just going to continue on, and I was going to miss my stop. Not a big deal. The bus stops in London are pretty close together, so if you miss your stop, take the next one, and then you're fine. Just a little bit more walking. So be aware of that. When the doors shut and the bus starts to move, if you haven't gotten off yet, you can just make sure that the bus driver knows you're getting off. If you're in a country where you don't speak the language, this happened to me in Spain and in Taiwan, usually people on the bus will help you. You just kind of have to wave, maybe go into the aisle and just wave Typically there's a button with the little handicap symbol that you press, and that tells the driver that at the next stop, that's the one that needs the ramp. If you don't press that button, then you either have to tell the bus driver where you're getting off, but sometimes they'll ask. So if you're going to a country where you don't speak the language, you should always show the bus driver your phone where you're getting off. But they might forget, because it's really not their job to remember everybody's stop. So if they forget your stop, and it's happened to me before where my stop was forgotten, and I put full faith in them, so I didn't press the button. And then I missed my stop. So always press the button if there is one. If there's not, you can wave, you can say, this is my stop. Depending on where you are, there might be someone else on the bus that speaks English and the native language, and they can help tell the bus driver, this is my stop. You can learn. Go to Google Translate or any other translate app and figure out how to say in that language, I'd like to get off at this stop, please. That would be a really nice thing and respectful thing to do when you're in another country that doesn't speak your language, whether or not it's English. I don't know what your native language is. Okay, so that's the buses. Most of the time buses are going to be accessible, and it's one of the better ways to travel, even though it takes longer. The normal buses, the day-to-day buses on the street are pretty good.